Welcome to Blaze News, The Mandate, Day 29. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, Attorney General Pam Bondi is still claiming that she will release the Epstein files despite being stonewalled by the FBI. Watch.
We will get everything. We will have it in our possession. We will redact it, of course, to protect grand jury information and confidential witnesses. But the American people have a right to know.
Last week, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy was kicked out of the White House as President Trump attempted to negotiate peace. And since then, Zelenskyy said that he still expects American aid to keep coming, and that with the war in Russia is far from over. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz recently explained what went down during Zelenskyy's meeting with President Trump. Take a look.
What became so evident to us in that session was he's not ready to talk peace at all. But here's the problem. Time is not on his side. Time is not on the side of just forever continuing this conflict. The American people's patience is not unlimited. Their wallets are not unlimited. And our stockpiles and munitions are not unlimited.
President Trump responded to Zelenskyy's statement on Truth Social, writing, "This is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelenskyy, and America will not put up with it for much longer. It is what I guess I was saying. This guy doesn't want to be there to get peace as long as he has America's backing." And Europe, in the meeting that they had with Zelenskyy, stated flatly that they cannot do the job without the U.S. Probably not a great statement to have been made in terms of show of strength against Russia. What were they thinking? I think we are all thinking that right now. Meanwhile, encounters at the southern border came in just over 8,000 during the month of February. That's down from nearly 200,000 in February of last year, and the lowest month in recorded history. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem delivered a message from President Trump to the world after these immigration numbers came out. Watch.
Let me deliver a message from President Trump to the world. If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it. Let me be clear. If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down. Criminals are not welcome in the United States.
And the wins just keep coming. Earlier today, President Trump announced a major investment in U.S. chip manufacturing. Watch.
Today, Taiwan Semiconductor is announcing that they will be investing at least $100 billion in new capital in the United States over the next short period of time to build state-of-the-art semiconductor manufacturing facilities. I think mostly it's going to be in Arizona, which is what I understand, which is a great state. I like it because I want it.
Trump's tariffs in Canada and Mexico are already making an impact. Honda is set to produce its next Civic in Indiana instead of Mexico, and expects to produce around 200,000 vehicles. Prior to the tariffs, 40% of Honda vehicles sold in the United States were imported from Canada and Mexico. President Trump also announced new tariffs on external agricultural products starting on April 2nd, writing on Truth Social that, "To the great farmers of the United States, get ready to start making a lot of agricultural product to be sold inside the United States. Have fun." Trump announced that the Treasury Department will be suspending all of the enforcement of the beneficial ownership information reporting requirements for American citizens. So small businesses will no longer be penalized if they fail to register to the reporting database. And Trump is set to join and address a joint session of Congress tomorrow on March 4th. Be sure to set your reminders and join me and all the other Blaze hosts live across the platforms from 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And Trump has posted that tomorrow night will be big, so you don't want to miss it. In other news, Republican Congressman Brandon Gill filed the Golden Age Act, which would put President Trump's face on the $100 bill, replacing Benjamin Franklin. And finally, Natalie Winters, she's the co-host of Steve Bannon's War Room, brought attention to an interesting story on X. Stephanie Psaki, it's Jen Psaki's sister, worked at the Population Council International for nearly a decade. And this group is a recipient of millions of dollars from USAID. Well, now let's bring in Blaze News editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson once again, fresh off of his trip from Washington, D.C. So we keep going over this, right? The Epstein files are the one thing that people keep pointing to. Pam Bondi is still out there talking on national television, saying, no, I will come out. These are going to be in our hands at some point in the future.
I think the first thing we need to say, I say this over and over again, what are the Epstein files? Like, what files are we talking about, right? So we're acting as if there's this set body, a file somewhere or a body of files that are the Epstein. What files? What the hell are we talking about? So there's different things. There's the Rolodex. There's a list of people that were, in his phone book. But that's everybody. Like, everyone knows everybody. Chris's line from Tucker, all famous people know each other. So that doesn't mean anything, the fact that he has various people's numbers. I think what most people are probably referring to are the flight log books to the island, right? But there were also people engaged in basically prostitution and blackmail, going to the place in New York, going to the place in New Mexico. So there's no like one set of Epstein files. That's number one. The other thing is there is without a doubt international intelligence agencies who were involved in collecting this information. I mean, there was video at all these places as well. So how much of that the FBI got? I think it got some of it. FBI agents were going in and taking out cameras and so forth. So there is a bunch of stuff out there, and some of it is in the U.S. So the thing is to remember is there's no one set of Epstein files. Is there more information that should come out? Absolutely. And I believe that some of it will come out. Some of it.
We see the Trump tariffs. I feel like there's a different tariff story every day on the show now. It's interesting to follow along with these, but it is huge just to go through and say, okay, you know what? I remember just seeing the headlines for John Deere, how they were laying off people in the United States, and then they were going to move their manufacturing down to Mexico for a lot of that.
Right.
I wonder if those plans and others like John Deere are still going to be in place now that tariffs are getting implemented.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are going to think twice. I think people are going to slow down. They're going to think twice. They're going to want to wait a little bit and be cautious to see what the hell happens here. So in the business's mind, it's like, well, will Trump really do this? This sounds very different than, it sounds like he's really into this. It's not just a revenge or a threat. And what if we really move into this kind of new era of economic structure? And there's a case to be made that we do, that we go back to the old Republican Party. Pre World War II. This is what they were actually for economically, to defend and protect American interests here. So I think you're going to have a lot of hesitation and caution.
I look at the chip manufacturing, and I know this was a big issue during COVID. People were very unsure if they were going to be able to get the chips that they needed for all of the devices. I mean, if you look at anything electronic, even beyond what you would think needs a chip, everything is connected to the internet now. So even like your refrigerators need them. But just to have it not even just in Taiwan and Malaysia, but now to have them really making a very large investment to make them in the United States is good just for national security purposes as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you can't make aspirin in your own country and you have to buy it from China, your enemy, never mind the chips, which is, you got to realize digital technology is the most powerful thing in the world, right? Other than nuclear, I mean, that's still a thing, but what's risen is digital technology. What is digital technology? Well, it's to be able to record things in smaller and smaller chips that are more and more powerful, right? So that computing power is the basis for power worldwide. So whoever controls the chips will be the most powerful country in the world. Well, the problem is right now we don't make enough of it here, right? So this is one of these things where a lot of people I know who are very knowledgeable in this field will say, we have a long ways to go. It's great that we're doing this now, but we are so far behind that we're in deep trouble. Some people are more optimistic. Either way, I say, this is great. As soon as possible, let's start making more and more of all of this here where we know it's going to be safe, as opposed to Taiwan.
Yeah, I wish that we started that about 20 years ago. But you know what? We have the investment now, and it's going to get started now. Don't go anywhere. Chris Bedford will break down why the Democrat Party needs Donald Trump next. Let's get into Good Ranchers, because since 2017, over 140,000 family farms in the United States have shut down. Well, why? Because a lot of meat in the grocery store isn't coming from American farms anymore. It's imported from overseas, where mass production and all the low costs take priority over quality. And this spring, we need to change that. So it's time to spring into action and put American farms first, because nothing beats American quality. That's why I choose GoodRanchers.com, because they stand for integrity, tradition, and 100% American-raised meat. All the products on GoodRanchers.com have trustworthy ingredients, and their meat is born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States, so you know exactly where it comes from. They're free from the hidden additives. There aren't the antibiotics. There's no hormones. There's no seed oils. It's just one simple ingredient that you can read, and that's meat. Good Ranchers is delivered straight to your door, offering you that true farm-to-table transparency, so you're supporting American ranches and getting that good meat that you can feel good about serving. It's clean, simple, exactly the way that it should be, and you can skip the grocery store. Right now, Good Ranchers is running their Spring into Action promotion, so when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want free chicken nuggets with no seed oils in them, free bacon, ground beef, or salmon in every order for a year. Just make sure to use my code Jill at checkout for $25 off your first order. Spring into action and help American farmers with every purchase. Visit GoodRanchers.com now. Remember, promo code Jill to get free meat and for a year and $25 off. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Last week, Matthew Peterson abandoned me and went to Washington, D.C. to spend some time with our Blaze senior politics editor and D.C. correspondent, Chris Bedford. So Chris joins us now. You guys are just going to talk about what you guys did in the swamp without me last week. So, the floor is yours, gentlemen.
We had so much fun without you. We got into all kinds of trouble.
Yeah.
In fact, I had to spend most of my day today catching up on things that I honestly should have finished on Friday. But we were gallivanting around town. And, we happened to head into the White House at a pretty interesting time for the country, for international relations. We walked in essentially at the beginning of another major step in the global reset that we are seeing, where America tells client states that they are not equal partners and will have to listen to us as senior partners. And as we were crossing from the old executive building, which is the big, massive mansion you might see in some pictures of the White House, right next to it, much bigger than the White House. As we were walking from there across the White House lawn, Zelenskyy was being ejected from the White House. There was security barriers everywhere. The place was absolutely abuzz, and it was a pretty interesting time to be in Washington.
Yeah, and we should say, that morning started for me at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast with JD Vance, maybe a slightly different JD Vance, but related in this way, and we were speaking about this together on Friday. So JD comes into the Catholic Prayer Breakfast Friday morning, and he talks about his conversion, great stuff, but he talks about the Pope, very magnanimous, says, remember the Pope actually had great words as a spiritual leader, even though we disagree, doesn't get into a tit for tat or fighting with the Pope. It's actually fairly moving, even though obviously they disagree on immigration. JD doesn't change his stance, but that was great. But the middle part of Vance's speech in the morning relates to his afternoon, because what he said there was, why should Catholics and really Christians be for Trump? It's not just the pro-life thing. He went beyond that and said the biggest thing is that the United States is going to defend Christians throughout the world, and it's going to be for peace. It's going to be for peace and not warmongering. And then he, lo and behold, as it turns out, we both follow him over to the White House, and you have this outburst that will go down in American history as a kind of turning point of what America First foreign policy looks like moving forward. And it was very interesting to hear that in the morning and then hear the very strong words later on in the afternoon.
This is something that's been neglected in American foreign policy for so long. The idea that the United States should defend Christians. I think it's partially based on this idea that because Christians, for most of American history, it's becoming a little less so recently, haven't been persecuted and are a majority in the United States, that they ought to be ignored, that we can go abroad and we do promote social values all the time in our foreign policy, whether it's democracy promotion or whether it's, this is a really big one, LGBTQ promotion. We'll basically help overthrow European governments if they run afoul of that sort of ideology. And we talk about the West a little bit, but we leave out really the font of the West, the source of the West, Christianity, that has been absent from our foreign policy for a long time. And it's not just in places where Christianity may be preserving ideals of Western civ, it's also the most persecuted religion on the entire planet. Every single week, priests are getting killed, churches are being attacked in Africa, in Asia, in the Pacific. This is a common occurrence, and the United States has generally sided against Christian populations, whether it's Bill Clinton in the 90s in Serbia and Bosnia and Kosovo, or our foreign policy basically across the planet. So to see a U.S. president say, you know what, we're actually interested in defending this deeply attacked population, this group that has no voice, is really no voice in a lot of different places. Like, for example, in the Israel-Palestine conflict, they're the only one there who doesn't have a military force. They're the ones who are the least, that have the least room at the table. To have a vice president of the United States come out and say that is a wonderful thing. And then to see that fast forward and then play out in action, that's the thing, is the Christianity properly understood, not the way it's explained to you by folks who've never seen the inside of a church, but properly understood, is a muscular idea that is confident, a religion that is confident in itself and is willing to overturn tables. So you take that insistence on peace, you take that insistence on not funding wars continuously forever and meat grinders, and sometimes you're going to see an argument with that. And that's how it played out in the Oval Office, where you've got two Christian populations fighting each other to the death in a meat grinder. The president in the United States is funding it, and they're saying, hold on a second, we're not going to do that anymore. That's how you see it start to play out in real life.
There's so much more to say about this topic and, of course, what happened on Friday as it comes out. We forget it's only 3 days. It's only been 3 days since this. But we should say a few things about that trip. One is, within the White House complex itself, you could feel the electricity, and people had the TVs on, and they're sort of watching, just like people at home, going, "Oh my God, I can't believe this! This was not, some planned event. This was not some setup. This was something that people really, really couldn't believe." That was palpable. The other thing that would be interesting for Chris to talk about is, the interlopers coming into D.C. like myself. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. The reason I like to go there now is because everything's electric. I mean,
it's true.
This isn't bragging about going to parties. It's just, if you go and you're part of this movement, you're seeing everybody. I mean, it's, Michael Knowles was at the cigar bar the night before. And then Mike Cernovich had a thing, cigar bar the day after, right? And you just see these different parts of the coalition coming together and starting to realize that they're actually in power, and there's a kind of excitement with that I think is just genuine, and it's kind of almost, it's not naive, it's just it's earnest.
Yeah, Bedford, what is it like seeing the conservatives take over DC?
It's so strange, and I love it. And you're welcome from all of us people who've been slogging it out in the trenches for the last 20 years, where everyone says, "Why are you in Washington? Why don't you move to Florida? Why don't you get out of there? It's just a swamp." It's like, well, someone has to be here, and someone has to make some noise, dig some trenches, and be able to put together comprehensive bar hopping guides for our visiting dignitaries from the free states of Texas and Florida and beyond.
Very important.
But to see it, I left DC after 18 years of living there. And moved to Northern Virginia, which was like a time warp back to the late 90s or early 2000s, when Republicans and Democrats disagreed but lived next to each other. Their children socialized together. There's not as many political signs in the yards, and there's not as many. Most of the flags here are American flags and occasionally sports teams' flags. Very different from Washington, D.C., which is a completely toxic, politically awful city. And to see something so ascendant right now, it's kind of must be like when you're living through the heyday of punk rock or something like that. When you go from a small group of people who are just pushed aside to seemingly everywhere, top of the charts, walking around popular, you see it. And there are leaders now for the MAGA movement in technology and business in Silicon Valley. Of course, there's always the thought leaders out there. You see it in politics, you see it in government. You see it in culture and in comedy. It's a pretty wild time to be living through, and I look forward to, once the years have passed, I don't want this to end, but looking back in 20 years, trying to explain to people what it was like to hand out so many white pills so quickly to so many people, but absolutely convinced it was over,
yeah,
including myself.
Yeah.
it's going to be an incredible story.
Going from the end of the country to whatever is going on right now in D.C. is one heck of a U-turn there. But, we've been talking about D.C. and the Republicans and Trump mandate for so long. I think we should check in on the Democrats. Here's a recent appearance from fan favorite Representative Jasmine Crockett on MSNBC.
So, unfortunately, we have someone that is occupying the White House. And as far as I'm concerned, he is an enemy to the United States. He swore an oath just like the rest of us. But right now, when you are literally putting us at risk, all because of what? Because you want to convince your followers that you should be a dictator too, that you should never leave the White House because you don't believe that elections should take place. I don't really understand what is going on. And I don't know what it's going to take to get people to wake up.
Literally. In your latest Beltway brief, you said that Democrats need Trump. So why is that?
So they need a Donald Trump. They need a great leader. They need someone who is capable of changing their party. So over the past few weeks, Democrats have been trying to figure out what the future is for their party. The best time in the world to do that is after you have been thrown out of office as an incumbent. There is no better rejection of your ideas than that. And that's when you're supposed to really, the reformers within your party are empowered, and the people who have been saying everything is fine, it's clear sailing, have egg on their face. They're in trouble. Now, this, of course, happened to Donald Trump, and it was a very difficult fight for those people who were saying this is not right. This job is not finished. I remember being on phone calls before that saying, well, the number one thing to do is to basically go into your Crusader castle, surround it with spikes and close the curtains, get ready for all the Bill Kristols of the world to come back and try to take the GOP. The Democrats are going through a similar moment right now where they've now been ejected, and there's a bunch of reformers who are saying, well, hold on, what are we doing here? Maybe we ought to not attack the United States left and right. Maybe we ought to not have this massive focus on identity politics. Maybe the hard left professional activists who run our town halls, run our nonprofits, and staff our offices are leading us astray. Maybe the demands of small dollar donor activists are actually completely repugnant to the American people, and they're being pushed back against. And you understand that, right? The way that you change a party is not simply with coming up with good ideas for how things probably ought to be better. You have to break bones. You have to move people. You have to really not kick in doors to change things. Donald Trump, over the last 8 years, has fundamentally changed the Republican Party to the incredible resistance of Washington, D.C. Republicans with the backing of the base. And the only way this party has gone from one of wars abroad and democracy promotion and free trade and a kind of a white middle class party to a working class, multi-ethnic party that is in favor of tariffs, that is more peaceful, is emphasis on nationalism and reindustrializing and restrictionist immigration policies, is because of the force of Trump backed by the demands of the people. The Democrats don't have that right now. They don't have an FDR who can come in after 3 terms for Republican presidents and change the party in the way it actually operates. They don't have a Ronald Reagan who can step over Watergate and Gerald Ford and kind of reshape the party. In order to take those ideas, they essentially need a Donald Trump.
So 60 seconds, what time we have left here. I mean, remember the lady on the plane I was talking to you about who admitted to me after going through all the NPC, shitlib sort of comments. She said, she admitted if we had someone who was just reasonable on the border, we would have won. That's the kind of leader you're talking about, right? But the problem is we feel this in our bones almost more than we can analyze it. The problem is that's not yet allowed. So if you're right, this person would have to come out of nowhere. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you look at the top people who are running. I mean, in poll after poll, there's only been 3 national polls done since the inauguration. Kamala Harris is leading by double digits for the potential Democratic nominee, and she's someone who's been rejected by the American people. She's hard left. She was a failure in the border. Second place is basically Pete Buttigieg, someone who removed his pronouns from his bio after the Republican victory, but who's kind of a robot, extremely corporate, certainly not a visionary leader. In California, you see Gavin Newsom winning the Democratic primary polls, of course, but this is someone whose state's got soaring crime, soaring homelessness, and his biggest city just burned down on his watch. So none of these people are the transformational figures that Democrats need, and I don't see where from the wilderness this person comes.
Well, that means that the fun in D.C. can continue for a little while longer. And maybe next time, I'll go too.
Oh, absolutely. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks, Bedford. We'll see you soon.
See you tomorrow.
All right, don't go anywhere. Conservative Review host Daniel Horowitz will tell you what DOGE really needs to do to slash government waste. Just ahead. Over the past few weeks, DOGE has made major headlines for slashing ineffective government agencies. But is this really the cost cutting that we need? Daniel Horowitz, he's the host of Conservative Review, and he recently wrote about this for Blaze News, explaining why much more is needed. And he joins us now. So, Daniel, what is the Trump administration missing when it comes to all these cost cutting? Because we do see all the headlines out there. We do see some energy and enthusiasm. So what more needs to be done?
Absolutely. What we've seen the last 5 weeks or so is a vision of what could be. Indeed, we can have nice things, and it is very auspicious. But what we've learned from the previous administration is that in order to sort of stick the landing, you got to codify this in the budget bills, and you got to get Congress on board. And unfortunately, what we're starting to see is that Mike Johnson is saying that he's going to do a continuing resolution and put everything on autopilot from last year. Well, what happens to USAID? What happens to the cuts at the Department of Education? So the problem is, a lot of this stuff is not enduring because Congress just goes and refunds it. But moreover, on the waste, fraud, and abuse side, look, obviously, we all agree it's worthwhile to go after overpayments in programs. But what I tried to show in this piece is that what the problem we have with inflation being driven by the deficits, that is not in part or, really significantly the result of overpayments or DEI or wasteful programs. It's the scope of the government, of the federal involvement in transportation, agriculture, healthcare, all of these things. And if we don't fundamentally reform healthcare, fundamentally devolve entire programs to states, eliminate entire programs, it's not really going to cut the deficit.
Daniel, I 100% agree, big picture wise. I wonder, though, if we could talk about the CR right now. I would say right now I'm perfectly fine with punting a little bit if it's for a few months, right? Just to keep this thing going and to start because I'm increasingly confident that various parts of the Trump administration, DOGE, people like Russ Vought at OMB, are going to be increasingly taking action to both educate the public, prepare for the sort of cuts and restructuring that we actually need. So I'm curious if you feel the same. Like I'm not, and maybe we disagree. I mean, it's fine, but I'm not, worried right now about a little bit continuing CR while the administration kind of figures things out. We beat the drums a little harder on some of this stuff and look for something, start to make underlying strategic changes. Now, of course, if we don't do that, I'll be yelling along with everyone else. But right now, the signs look fairly good. And the problem, right, is that Congress, they need to be, the screws need to get tighter and tighter on these guys. And there needs to be, there needs to emerge from the administration some of these priorities. And there needs to be a space to fight that out. I'm not sure the time to fight it out is right now, but certainly it'll be coming up soon. Does any of this make sense to you?
So I think we'd all agree that if we had a vision dangled in front of us, hey, this is the fight they'll fight on, we'll go there. I've been doing this for 15 years. It's the same line. This is literally March of 2017. I actually dug up today a column I wrote. April 25th, it was about a month later. Back then, the next fight, they called it the slim budget. Here's the problem. Structurally, the same reason they won't fight now, they won't fight then either. They're scared of a shutdown. I mean, that's what it boils down to. There's no back end to sort of getting this massive spending cut without a budget, without an appropriation bill. So you're going to have to make the case. And Trump has a bigger megaphone than they do. And he has a bigger bully pulpit than he's ever had. I think as time goes on, the capital from the original electoral win fades even more and you come closer to the next election. I just don't see it happening. To me, if you can't stand before the American people and say the Democrats want to fund Hamas and USAID, I don't know when that's ever going to get better. That's my concern. It's not so much not fighting now. It's what I believe is the reason. The reason is ultimately they're scared of a government shutdown. It's not like, hey, we want to first work out reconciliation or this thing and then deal with it later. But, I'm happy to be proven wrong. So
real quick, just to be clear, are you talking about from the point of view of Congress? I mean, of course, they're scared of a shutdown. What about the administration? What about the executive?
I mean, that's what's hard to tell, and I think we'll see what Trump ultimately signs off on. But again, my concern is, we're talking about the need to reform healthcare and obviously welfare programs, but I'm talking about just merely codifying what DOGE already tried to do. Remember, a lot of these orders are being enjoined in the courts. Some of them hopefully will win on appeal, but maybe some of them we won't. And that's another reason why there's an urgency for them to be put into the budget now. Now, I will say, when you mention Rust vote and OMB, there is another idea. Okay, Congress, let's say, has a bad budget bill. Trump could come along with a rescissions package. So he could demand, all right, let's rescind USAID. Let's rescind the DEI office at the Department of Education. And that is another process that does not require 60 votes in the Senate. But my concern with that is once you start taking it apart and you don't have it in one must-pass bill, you always have a constituency, even among Republicans, that's going to support it. We already see, even with USAID, you have plenty of Republicans supporting it. So the only way that's going to work is if Trump really starts leaning in heavily on, specific moderates.
All right, Daniel. Well, I want to talk to you about the Republican coalition. I was on the Deace group last week with our friend Steve Deace, and he brought this up in terms of Vivek Ramaswamy running for governor of Ohio. But the question that he posed is, can Vivek, and for our purposes, I would like to insert JD Vance in this equation. But he said, can this person go through and unify the Daniel Horowitz wing of the Republican Party and essentially the ultra MAGA wing of the Republican Party? I want to keep this focused at the national level with you. So first of all, what are those two wings of the party? What is the Daniel Horowitz wing of the party all the way through ultra MAGA? And then do you think that JD Vance has a potential to actually bring those groups together?
So I think what Steve might have been referring to is those that, like a laser beam, focused on the scoreboard on the field, and those who enjoy the cheerleaders, the food, the music, the ambience. And, that's the thing. Could you provide the day-to-day entertainment while also creating enduring victories? And I think that really is our challenge now. That, like I'm saying, a lot of these things, I went through the first administration. And what we saw is the first few months looked awesome. But then there's very specific things that we need to be focused on to stick the landing. And if you don't, over time, it kind of falls apart. So, that's what I'd like to see. Vivek obviously is very good with the social media stuff. What I've noticed, it's very interesting. Everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face, as the famous philosopher Mike Tyson once said. And everyone's really good on social media when they don't have an actual opponent in an actual political fight. You're facing a government shutdown. You're facing, in Florida, Amendments 3, Amendments 4, massive lobbies coming in, and you actually have to fight for it. It's very easy to say, oh, yeah, Lincoln Riley's murder, men and female sports, Biden's spending like crazy and inflation. All right, well, what are you going to cut? Are you going to deport people beyond Laken Riley's murder? You see what I mean? Then it gets a little bit harder, and you have to finesse it. You have to have a good message. You have to have a plan. And we're starting to see some of that come together. And I think, what Trump did with Ukraine, categorically changing direction, speaking with moral clarity, JD as well, I think that megaphone could be taken to domestic policy. And I'm going to be looking to Tuesday night, I think is a great opportunity to use that bully pulpit to put points on the board.
So when you look at this now, I mean, what are the sides out there? I mean, obviously we know there's a uniparty congressional establishment that doesn't want to do anything, that's been kicking the can down the road for decades, never has passed a budget. They have to learn how to pass a budget again. Probably for that, they'll need to be forced by the executive branch. But how do you kind of see the sides of this, given that MAGA has become very interesting because of Elon Musk and DOGE, right? And where do you fit sort of the OMB people in this? You say a little bit more about what are the sides?
So it's interesting. You find Elon himself has been, posting a lot of Thomas Massey's gripes with the budget and some of what we're talking about, even as there's other forces in the administration, like we saw in Trump 1, maybe at a Treasury, that are negotiating this bill. Remember, I mean, when you have Mike Johnson indicate that he's going to take a certain direction on a very big bill, he's not doing it in a vacuum. He is doing it in consultation with people in the administration. So I do think there is a little bit of a clash there. I think Elon clearly is for real. I think what he has said, and I really like this about him, he is tracing the inflation to the spending. I think in general, Republicans need to do a better job vividly painting that picture, that this cost of living you don't like is directly the result of some of these programs you might like as well. So you got to pick a lane. If you just talk about abstract spending cuts, maybe people don't want that. So I think he's done a good job. But again, I mean, there are others that are just content to sort of meme things online, show their binders, on social media, and enjoy that sort of thing. And there's always going to be stuff to enjoy and have a good time. But remember, it's only a couple of pieces of legislation that are going to determine the outcome of a majority of these factors.
Yeah, all of our eyes are definitely on his speech on Tuesday night. But the last question, while we have you here, I want to know, since January 20th to where we are right now, how would you grade Trump and his implementation of his mandate thus far?
So again, at an executive level, I'd grade it, almost an A. Everything he said he was going to do, he has embarked on doing. Ironically, the one thing I was the most bullish about, I'm actually a little bit less bullish about, and that was HHS. I am a little bit surprised that the mRNA vaccines haven't been touched at all, and there are signs of even new vaccines being approved. RFK did appear to backtrack a little bit on vaccines yesterday in a Fox News op-ed, which is a little bit surprising, whereas other things, obviously getting rid of entire agencies, at least executively, have been terrific. Look, the table is set. Now we just have to eat. He's incurred whatever, or spent whatever political capital he has on the perception that he's making heavy cuts. Let's just consummate it and do it for real.
Daniel Horowitz, thanks so much.
See you later.
Peterson, I never thought we would see Horowitz with an A grade out there.
I mean, you can take that to the bank, because he wouldn't say that unless he very much believed it. Pretty amazing.
When you're known as the prophet of woe and lamentation, as our friend Steve Deace calls him all the time, for him just to come out there and be like, you know what? I think I'd give him an A.
He's a hard grade. He identifies as a hard grader, and he is a hard grader. But that means something. That means something.
He's doing pretty well. Well, what will take center stage for Trump's speech tomorrow night? We'll have your answers right after this. Well, everyone tomorrow night will be all eyes on President Donald Trump. He will have his address to the joint session of Congress. We'll be carrying that for you here on The Blaze. But I went to X earlier today because I asked you, what is everybody going to be talking about tomorrow night after Trump addresses the nation? So here are some of the replies. Heretic Dave said, I think the biggest topic will be DOGE. There will be a lot of people talking about NGO and what those were doing with all the money and how much of that was coming back to Washington, D.C. Well, we saw Jen Psaki's sister getting a lot of that money coming back to her, to Stephanie Psaki.
Everyone's relatives, everyone's spouses, they're all making money off USAID or the equivalent from lefty NGOs. That's how Washington works. But, to Heretic Dave's point, DOGE is one of the most popular concepts in government agencies, probably in American history. I think we can already safely say that.
We see Donald Trump's poll numbers go up even again this last time. I think that is most likely linked to like what DOGE is doing and exposing all of the corruption that's out there. Production assistant writes in, he says, hopefully a reassurance on Epstein files. Another superficial but hilarious name change of a landmark or an official JFK Trump assassination date dump. There's a lot to choose from there, but, a hilarious name change of a landmark. I think that we could have odds out there in Las Vegas on some of that at this point in time.
Yeah, the PA, production assistant, the PA is just going for the fun stuff, and I hope for that too. I'm wide open. Let's have fun.
Yeah, all your favorite Blaze hosts are going to be here tomorrow night for the President Trump address to Congress. It's all going to get started here at 7:30 Eastern. You're going to want to join us throughout the whole thing because we're going to break it down before, and then we're going to see what Trump says, which he says already is going to be big. It's going to be huge. He's going to say a lot of things, and then stick around with us after because we'll break it all down afterwards as well. But one of the things that I'm looking forward to is probably just the JD Vance facial expressions, because we do know that he usually, he's going to be sitting there behind Donald Trump. Earlier today on X, he went out and put this up, which I just said, man, when JD Vance is using It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme, this one is out there all over the internet. I just thought, I love that JD Vance is one of us.
No, this guy deserved it. I mean, he's putting out this nonsense about Ukraine and this complicated, ridiculous, again, Russian collusion, whatever. And it's so refreshing to have this sort of direct communication from our leaders where JD Vance just puts up the meme and goes, no, you're ridiculous.
Yeah, and you did. You spent all day on Friday, basically, with JD Vance following around from the National Prayer Breakfast on to just him and Zelenskyy and just the foreign policy that was happening there between the United States and Ukraine.
Yeah, I think that both incidents on Friday reveal something about where American politics is going. JD Vance is the preeminent figure of the future in American politics. He solidified that with his remarks against Zelenskyy, telling him off in front of everyone. And I want to just reiterate some points, zooming out from politics and whatever you think about Ukraine. This is an era in which the transparency is real. You see people governing in real time. Twitter does this, right? Donald Trump does not make his opinions a secret about various things. And so, Zelenskyy played into this as well, right? He, instead of behind closed doors, the big mistake he made is because instead of having disagreement behind closed doors, he continued to talk about his problems in public, right, with the deal, and it sort of fetch about, it's not really a security guarantee. That's fine to argue about. That's the whole point of arguing about things behind closed doors. He refused to sign this agreement multiple times. You wonder if he really wanted to do it. So Zelenskyy is the first one who brought to the table, no, I'm going to, in public, instead of just saying my piece, the old televisual age, right? It would have been just, you say some pro forma things that are nice, you go and sign the document, and you're done. Instead of doing that, he brought his real concerns out in public, right? That's new. That doesn't usually happen. So that's part of the digital age. But of course, that was a very foolish thing to do because what you saw was not a setup, but no hesitation. You could see the discomfort rise on the part of Trump and JD Vance in those moments. And then finally, Vance, right? The millennial, the guy who's going to respond to you on Twitter, just has enough and forgets about the supposed decorum that has already been broken by Zelenskyy, saying what should be said behind closed doors in public, and still whining and bitching about this in front of everyone. And Vance comes in and gives him a piece of his mind, and then backs off, and you could see Trump do the same. I mean, Trump was like responding to modern therapeutic talk too, by the way, when he said, don't tell me how we're going to feel. Don't tell me how I'm going to feel. It's a good sign of an abusive relationship if someone's telling you how you should feel. So this was an amazing moment where you saw not only transparency, it's more about being able to directly see how things work in public increasingly. I mean, that's what DOGE is about, right? That's what this new digital era is about. And I think it's still shocking to a lot of people who are going to get over it. But ultimately, this sort of display of real talk in public, which is so rarely seen in politics over the last few decades, is going to win over the hearts and minds of people throughout this country.
They say nonverbal communication is 80% of all communication. And Trump hit him with the little hand gesture. And I think it was Godfather 2, right? That was there. And then everybody after JD Vance went around and he did the Marine chop, right? The hand right at you. Everybody was like, oh, you're in trouble now. Now that JD Vance is bringing that out, you don't want to know what comes next if you're Vladimir Zelenskyy.
No, exactly. And this was real. I mean, this was not state. This is the thing people don't understand. Like, this is I'll give Zelenskyy credit. He was speaking what he really thinks. He did it first, and then they gave him what they really thought in the public square, and that's remarkable. And as Trump himself said, this is why I love Trump, because he's like, I have this little part in my brain too, but where Trump he said, well, it'll be great TV, that's for sure. He knew right away this will be great TV, which it was. But of course, the more important thing is you're watching in real time what people actually think, and you're watching them actually like wrangle with each other.
So Vladimir Zelenskyy didn't know that everything had changed. He knew that Trump was in office, yes, but when he arrived, he was still greeted by all of the U.S. senators, right? There were so many lining up, waiting to just shake his hand and, welcome to our country. We're so thankful that you're here. And so he still has that welcome. He goes into the Oval Office. He's like, yeah, you guys are going to give me my money. And things have changed. Yeah,
so you even saw Lindsey Graham, your favorite senator,
that's right.
Come out afterwards. He's very angry. Lindsey was very upset. And he ruined it for all of them. So this was supposed to be set up in the normal way that you do a deal, the normal way you do diplomacy. There's a certain pomp and circumstance. They thought they had him there. He's snaked out of signing the thing before. He's been he's lied about it. He said it was, going back and forth, as Rubio has said to the press. So they were concerned about it, but they had it set up for him as a W, where, the senators were going to come. They were all there. They're prepared for lunch. He decided to give his real truth, right? This is what he really thinks, and he got what the American leadership now thinks in public. And my point is that ultimately this is going to be a good thing, because I think it's going to be very enlightening and persuasive ultimately to the American people.
There is a new boss in town. It's a good thing to see on a national stage here for this, and then also with all the foreign policy that's going on. I can't wait to see what Donald Trump has to say tomorrow night for his joint session of Congress. Be sure to stay here with Blaze TV. We'll have all of your favorite hosts. It's going to be a fun one tomorrow night. Everything gets started at 7:30 Eastern. We'll see you then.